Okay, carrying on in chapter 12, we are going to just pick up where we left off on page 188. Make sure you've got your book. We're going to start right where Jean enters into Finney's room. And as we read this, I want you to be thinking about the emotions that Jean's body language infers, and also why Jean feels released to speak when he sees Finney's hands shaking so badly. Okay, so we'll start off with some quick ones here. So, bottom of page 188. I knocked and went in. He was stripped to the waist, sitting up in bed, leafing through a magazine. I carried my head low by instinct, and I had the courage for only a short glance at him before I said quietly, "I brought your stuff." "Put the suitcase on the bed here, will you?" The tone of his words fell dead center, without trace of friendliness or without a trace of friendliness or unfriendliness. Not interested and not bored. Not energetic and not languid. I put it down beside him, and he opened it and began to look through the extra underwear and the shirts and socks I had packed. I stood precariously in the middle of the room, trying to find somewhere to look and something to say, wanting desperately to leave and powerless to do so. Phineas went carefully over his clothes, apparently very calm. It wasn't like him to check with such care, not like him at all. He was taking a long time at it, and then I noticed that as he tried to slide a hairbrush out from under a flap holding it in the case, his hands were shaking so badly that he couldn't get it out. Seeing that released me on the spot. "Finny, I tried to tell you before. I tried to tell you when I came to Boston that time." Okay, I'm going to pause there. Jean's body language reveals his emotions. Okay, we've already been inside his head before walking in the room, but I want you to think about what's being inferred by the way what he's doing with his body. Okay, he says he, quote, "carried my head low by instinct." He only had, quote, "courage for a short glance." And lastly, he stood precariously in the middle of the room, trying to find somewhere to look. What emotions are inferred by these actions? I want you to pause the video right now and jot down your ideas in your book. And then once you have a couple ideas written down, then come back. I would say that the emotions inferred by this body language is some amount of shame, embarrassment, and nervousness, and like he's ready to be judged. He's a guilty. I don't know, convict, but a guilty criminal coming in to be judged. And it creates tension in the room for sure. He's ready for Finney to kind of sort of let him have it, and his body language doesn't necessarily speak of the courage and the resolve that was going on in his head before he went in. It's a very submissive, quiet, maybe sad, but definitely kind of shame and guilt are coming through. All right, the second question is Finney's hands are shaking so badly. And when Jean sees this, he described himself as he can't go and he can't stay and he can't go kind of thing. Doesn't know where to look, can't speak. But when he sees Finney's hands shaking so badly, that's what frees him to start speaking to Finney. And so my question to you is, why? Why does seeing Finney's hands shake so badly make Jean feel like, okay, I can talk now? Pause the video and write down what you think. Like, this isn't a hard question. Okay. Seeing his hands shake so badly shows Jean that Finney is feeling emotional. Finney is just as shattered, just as broken, and possibly just as nervous about this conversation as Jean is. Okay? What Jean had seen the night before when he tried to talk to him through the window of the infirmary felt to Jean like hate, okay? And it doesn't seem that that's what Finney's shaking hands would communicate. He says his voice is just dead center. He's not betraying any emotion, not friendliness, and not hate. Just sort of almost numb, maybe. Just bland and I don't want to say robotic, but maybe. Okay. But when he sees the shaking hands, it's the emotion that's under the brave face that Finney's putting on. Okay, and when he sees that vulnerability, when he sees that emotion, then he feels like it's okay to connect emotionally with Finney, to look him in the eye and talk to him like a friend. Okay. Let's move on to the first part of their conversation. Okay, remember, this is their final conversation. Neither one knows it's their final conversation, but you and I, we know that because we've already read the book. Okay, let's pick up where where Jean is speaking to Finney, the last sentence that I read before. Finney, I tried to tell you before. I tried to tell you when I came to Boston that time. I know, I remember that. He couldn't, after all, always keep his voice under control. What'd you come around here for last night? I don't know. I went over to the window and placed my hands on the sill. I looked down at them with a sense of detachment, as though they were hands somebody had sculptured and put on exhibition somewhere. I had to, then I added with great difficulty. I thought I belonged here. I felt him turning to look at me, and so I looked up. He had a particular expression which his face assumed when he understood but didn't think he should show it, a settled, enlightened look. Its appearance now was the first decent thing I'd seen in a long time. He suddenly slammed his fist against the suitcase. I wish to God there wasn't any war. I looked sharply at him. What made you say that? I don't know if I can take this with a war on. I don't know. If you can take... What good are you in a war with a busted leg? I'm going to kind of skip over the bit where he tells about how he's been writing to everybody and how he's kept it a secret. And that's why he's been keeping up this whole sham about no war. And then I'm going to continue where he says, I'll hate it everywhere. I'll hate it everywhere if I'm not in this war. Why do you think I kept saying there wasn't a war all winter? I was going to keep saying it until 2 seconds after I got a letter from Ottawa or Chungking or some place saying, yes, you can enlist with us. A look of pleased achievement flickered over his face momentarily, as though he had really gotten such a letter. Then there would have been a war. Finney, my voice broke, but I went on. Phineas, you wouldn't be any good in the war, even if nothing had happened to your leg. A look of amazement fell over him. It scared me, but I knew what I had... I'll try again. But I knew what I said was important and right, and my voice found that full tone voices have when they are expressing something long felt and long understood and released at last. They'd get you someplace at the front, and there'd be a lull in the fighting, and the next thing anyone knew, you'd be over with the Germans or the Japs, asking if they'd like to field the baseball team against our side. You'd be sitting in one of their command posts teaching them English. Yes, you'd get confused and borrow one of their uniforms, and you'd lend them one of yours. Sure, that's just what would happen. You'd get things so scrambled up, nobody'd know who to fight anymore. You'd make a mess, a terrible mess, out of war. Okay, I'm going to pause there. So the notes that I have here just explore the idea that Phineas finally reveals frustration and finally confesses the whole reason behind his denial of war throughout the winter is that he knows he can't be a part of it. Okay? In this quote, I'll hate it everywhere if I'm not in this war. Finney's desperate to be included in the war. Why? Well, one probably main reason is that the idea of not being a part of what everybody else is being a part of. That the feeling of being left behind, only one that doesn't participate. Possibly it has even deeper, more honorable feelings of him wanting to do his part. We've talked about how the strong feeling of nationalism and patriotism in the USA at this time was very strong. So could be that Phineas is very patriotic and honorable and wants to do his part, but it could simply be that he'll feel unworthy or left out or left behind when everyone he knows is going to go off to war. It would seem to us, possibly you think, wait, you got a free ticket to not go. Your life will be spared. But that's not the way Finney's looking at it. Okay? And it's a kind of a big reveal moment that all this whole sort of imagination, fantasy, ideas of there not really being a war, all his like conspiracy theories about it being a big sham, has all been a cover because he's felt like he's going to miss out, be left behind, not be a part of the action, not be a part of the effort, and not be a part of maybe the heroic fight against tyranny in the world. And as we've talked about before, that Finney has a very heroic character, and that would, suit his character well. Then we get into this very profound moment when Jean makes a, quote, important and right observation about Finney. And that is that Finney would not be good at war. And that Finney would make a terrible mess out of war. I'd like you to pause the video here and answer these questions in your notebooks. What reasons does he give, first of all? Okay, that's just for you, look right there on page 190 and 191. What reasons does he give that Finney would be bad at war, okay? And then I want you to think back into earlier chapters and think about where we as readers have seen evidence for these. Where have we seen the proof that Jean has that Finney will do these things, okay? The reasons why he's not going to be any good at war, and where we've seen these patterns in Finney's life. All right, go ahead and pause the video, jot down your ideas. I'll wait for you. Okay. The reasons he gives, he says that Finney will start playing sports. He'll want to teach them English. He'll want to make friends. And he'll get the uniforms all mixed up, and they won't know who's on whose side. Okay? this all is a good example of, or touches or connects back to earlier on in the book, in earlier chapters, where Finney's always going out for sports, always trying to make a game, always trying to invent things, and always trying to get everybody involved in sports. He's friendly. There's not anybody that he's not friends with. There's not anybody that he doesn't try to include. And there's all the scenes or mentions about Finney and Jean, and how Finney just puts on any old clothes. He doesn't care if he's putting on his clothes or Jean's clothes. It's like he almost doesn't think about what he's putting on. And especially that scene where he puts the tie on as the belt, and where Jean thinks he's going to get in trouble. He's just not careful about those kinds of things, and those are all good proofs, if you will, that Finney's character isn't suited for army life. But mainly, Finney sees life very innocently, very childlike. Like life's one big football match, and that isn't going to work on the battlefield. Right? Jean can tell him right now that's his approach to life is not going to work. So while Finney doesn't want to be left out and thinks he wants to be a part of the war, Jean is making this profound statement about who Finney is in his character and in his essence, his harmonious, unified spirit and personality. And he says, it wouldn't work, Finney. You would not be good at war. You don't have what it takes to go to war, to have enemies. Okay? That's going to be a really important idea when we talk about chapter 13. Okay? All right, we'll end this video and join me for the next one.